Welcome to this lesson dedicated to the first impromptu by Frédéric Chopin in A-flat major, and in this lesson I'm going to focus on efficiency of motion, on motion coordinations and technique in order to be able to play this piece naturally, with ease and without tension. And this of course will help us tremendously to create a vibrant, interesting interpretation, and I will elaborate on that more in the next lessons of this course. So if you want to master this piece and if you want to have an access to a full course dedicated to this piece, please follow the link in the description to this video. So let's have a look a little bit on hands separately here, because in my opinion they are very different. And here we have a dialogue of two very different entities, because in the right hand you might see slurs indicated by the composer. He writes a lot of slurs above the right hand, and he also writes a legato with the letters. So this double indication of legato shows us that legato in the melody in the right hand was eventually very, very important for Frédéric Chopin. But in the left hand we don't have that, and we have different textures. If in the right hand we have very singing melodies with a lot of chromatic and a lot of narrow distances between sounds. And you see there are a lot of very expressive chromatic moves in the melody, which we have to manage, which we have to interpret somehow very expressively. But in the left hand we have those wide leaps and no indications about legato. So in my opinion we might play left hand with a good support, non-staccato of course, but not connecting sound. So a good supported non-legato, something like then, for example, such long notes, which happen sometimes here, would sound more interesting also in the left hand. And in my opinion, that contraposition of characters between the right and the left hand might sound actually quite convincing. Yeah, so I think that we can, there is a lot of room to play with it. And for that reason, I personally prefer to use a reduced amount of pedal, let's say. But how do we get there? How do we coordinate motions in order to feel ourselves really comfortable here? Because I have to say that I have a sensation that if I would learn this piece when I was like 12 years old, I would probably play it much easier actually. And since I have learned it only this year, I actually had a little bit of a hard time to make it really comfortable and to feel myself at home here, because all these narrow intervals in the right hand, like, I find them a little bit confusing for the hand. And in the left hand, of course, we have those wider leaps and some uncomfortable position changes. So in this lesson, I'm going to break all this down and share with you my tips how I mastered this piece. So in the left hand, it's very important to form a certain procedure how you play these accompaniment structures. And for that, we need a good support on the fifth finger. But at the same time, you activate the finger, activating the nail joint here, but at the same time, you kind of push off the key, like that. So that motion, you need that joint, of course, activation of your knuckle and of your nail joint, but at the same time, you jump off the key, kind of. And then you land properly on the thumb, and when you land on the thumb, your wrist goes to the level with the keys. That's essential, because if you play with the higher wrist, when you play thumb notes, then of course you will feel yourself very much insecure, and this is what happens to a lot of players in my experience. So you push off the fifth finger, but by the time you reach the thumb, make sure that your wrist will reach the level of the keys. Never go lower than that, but you should feel that support here. And of course, positioning of the thumb is also quite important. So the thumb shouldn't be like vertical, but it should not lay at the key also too much. Yeah, so it's something in between. You still have a narrow angle between the thumb, the last phalange of your thumb, and the key. There's like a 10 or 15 degree angle probably between the finger and the key. And the wrist is quite close to the level with the keys. Then you have support in this muscle, which stabilizes the thumb, this muscle which is closer to the rib of the hand, and in the wrist. You feel that support in the wrist, which doesn't allow you to sink lower. And since I personally prefer to play that left hand non-legato, I will practice it also with a good support, always reaching the bottom of the keys, but non-legato. but the motion is as smooth as if I would play it legato. So if you're not sure about a good finger release, tension release between sounds, then of course you can learn it on legato, separating just the fifth finger, in order to avoid stress between 5 and 1. When we hit any kind of like longer note which we are supposed to hold, you make an impulse, but then you free up as much of the hand as possible in order to avoid static tension in the hand. Freeing up and then employing other fingers. But I personally would already start playing it non-legato. Same trajectory, but releasing fingers, and this is a very important difference. Yeah, we release fingers after the hit. We don't pull them up. Yeah, so after you have after you have reached the bottom of the key, you just release the finger. You completely switch off and transfer the weight to the next finger. And you should literally feel how the weight travels across the hand palm, from left to right, center, left, right, center, left, right. And the rest of the hand is of course absolutely free. Also make sure that your shoulder is relaxed and your overall sitting posture is more or less straight and stable. So you basically go through the whole left hand like that. In order to memorize this piece faster, of course, it helps to eliminate those passing notes as well, because this D, for example, here is a passing note, and harmonic sounds are A flat, E flat, C. Yeah, we have an A flat major chord at first. This is our tonic, and then we get to our dominant in the second half of the first bar. So you play just chords in order to memorize chord progression. And if you can analyze functions a little bit, if you know about something about music theory, and you can understand where do we have like tonic, dominant, subdominant, and other functions and other chords, that would be of course also very helpful. When we get to bar 8, 9, and so on, when the texture changes a bit and we have another voice, this is a beautiful section, of course, and in the left hand also there is a danger of having tension in the hand because you are supposed to hold these longer notes. But we have to avoid it consciously by consciously coordinating our motions in also a certain way. So whenever you reach to the lower voice, to that extra additional voice written with quarters, you go in the keyboard. That's it. And when you do so, you just push your elbow a little bit forward, activating the joint of the finger, which presses that lower note 4, 3, 5. And of course, the wrist remains in a neutral state, so the wrist doesn't go up. This motion is necessary only to activate the joint. And at first, slowly coordinating motion so that these motions would be really precise while you hit the keys, not between hits. So forward, rest, and then leaning sensation on the thumb. So for the thumb, you always, like in most of cases actually in piano playing, you go kind of back, leaning on the key with the finger, finding support in the wrist, and the motion of the forearm is rather like backwards out of the keyboard, like that. Then again, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. You can exaggerate these motions slightly in the slower tempo, but then of course you have to minimize them. So they would not be too visible. Yeah, they should be very, very subtle and efficient, and they are right at the head. Yeah, they are not around, so we avoid sloppy rounded motions. So this is not helpful, yeah, because there is too much going on, and I have those sloppy rounded motions which people usually propagate, but this is a very like blurred approach. Yeah, we need a more functional approach by applying these motions in the keyboard and out of the keyboard precisely when you hit the key. Here, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. So no distraction, nothing rounded and sloppy happens here. Then of course, whenever we have a leap, like this one in bar 12, you first release the finger. So for here you have to release completely, release, and then activate the fifth finger. And also you move kind of in a circle. So here you remain low and then you go up. So kind of pushing off the bass. We need that for motion efficiency here. Whenever we have even more uncomfortable spots, like in bar 21, 22, here is especially important to control that you have that efficiency of motion and that you transfer the weight from 5 to 1, releasing those fingers that don't work. So the weight of the hand always follows the fingers that work. That way, learn properly with a support on the thumb as well, because very often people kind of get stuck to their fifth finger and the thumb struggles then. So you have to support each finger. Then if you want to make a more difference between accents and not accented notes, then you just push that finger faster in the key. That spot in general in bars 23, 24 is quite uncomfortable. I have missed a lot when I have learned this piece here, because it's quite uncomfortable to get here. And there are a few things to notice. You will need, of course, a certain amount of time with that spot anyway, but of course there are tips which might help you to master it faster. First of all, of course, a complete relaxation of the hand while you leap. So here, between A flat and C, you should have an ultimate freedom in the hand. Then when you play the A flat, while you still play it, so while your finger still goes down to the key, your forearm already starts to move, you see? So in such situations when we have to leap, you start moving with your forearm even while you finish to play the previous position. So that motion is very important. Then on the way, while you're on the fly, you turn your hand, reaching for the next note. That efficiency of motion is very, very important, because in most of cases, people start moving after they have finished to play that note, and that's already too late. There is no enough time. So if you play like that, if you start moving while you finish playing a position with your forearm, then the distance doesn't really matter, basically. You have enough time to reach. You just have to gain that moving momentum while you're still finishing to play this position. And of course, you can experiment with trajectory. So you might think of an arch like that. So kind of landing on the bass note from above. So up, left, and down. But you can also try staying low and push off the bass. It's very individual, so here we just have to think about it. But how you move from position to position, like how quickly you start moving to position from position to position, is very important.